Hi, this is Jim from Safety Wars. Before we start the program, I want to make sure everyone understands that we often talk about OSHA and EPA citations, along with some other regulatory actions from other agencies, legal cases, and criminal activity. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Proposed fines are exactly that, and they are often litigated, reduced, or vacated. We use available public records, news accounts, and press releases. We cannot warranty or guarantee the details of any of the stories we share, since we are not directly involved with these stories, at least not most of the time. Enjoy the show.
This show is brought to you by Safety FM.
And from the border of liberty and prosperity in the highway to the north, this is Safety Wars for, Tuesday, September 19, 2023. Where have I been? Maritime training. So, as everyone here knows, we do OSHA outreach training in all four disciplines. That is disaster response worker, construction, general industry, and maritime. So I got a call last week from a client, or actually 2 weeks ago, a new client. That was a listener of this show. And she said, hey, look, we'd like to have you in and do some maritime training in marine terminals. And we've been there for the last 2 days. As everyone knows, it's a 10-hour class this was. So for a 10-hour course, you need 2 days worth of, it's going to take you 2 days, no matter what. That's where we were. And dealing with the UN week in New York City, it's been a very unpleasant situation with traffic for the last 2 days and weather. So I could not make it on. So that's where I've been. If you want to get me, if you don't get enough of Safety Wars here, you can always hire me to do your training classes, to manage your projects at 845-269-5772 or Jim at safetywars.com. You too could have Jim Polzel at your facility all the time. All Jim Polzel all the time. Are you ready for that? I know. Hey, Jim, you can't be serious. Jim, you can't be serious. Good to be back. This past weekend, I attended a wedding in New Hampshire. It was a lovely wedding. One of my friends who passed away about 6 years ago now. I can't believe it's 6 years in a workplace accident. His widow got remarried this weekend. It was a wonderful, wonderful ceremony, wonderful party, wonderful reception, wonderful happy hour, wonderful on all, by all accounts. So, what are we talking about tonight? We're going to be talking about personal protective equipment here and what you may need in a disaster. So I have, just as a reminder, we have props here and everything else. So just as a reminder, we're going to talk about this hierarchy of controls. So, as we know, right, with any of this stuff, the big idea we want to put forward here is don't become part of a problem. That's what all this disaster preparation is. There's already problems out there. Don't make this problem a bigger problem. Whatever you're dealing with as far as disasters. Hold on 1 second here. I have to do something. I'm going to go to a commercial real quick here.
That's my daddy! That's my daddy!
Have you listened or watched the Safety War Show? It does stream live on the radio and on the streamer-emers that we have. So if you have not taken a listen to Jim Polzel and what the hell he's doing every evening with Safety Wars, I would strongly encourage you to to take a view or take a listen, whichever option is available for you, and take a listen to what the hell he has going on. It's definitely, it will take some deep dives in some information that you might be interested in.
All right, so sorry about that. It is allergy season here in the Northeast of the United States, and you got the usual allergy symptoms I had to resolve. Anyway, so let's try this again. We're going to share here. Big idea. Don't become part of the problem. Don't make your problem worse. And when you deal with PPE, it could be a physical or it could be a chemical hazard, but hazardous materials, what have you. Remember, you have three things. Don't get it in you. How could it get in you? 4 routes of exposure: inhalation, injection, contact, or ingestion. Don't get it on you, right? Meaning, don't get it on your skin at all. Number 3, don't bring it home. Don't expose others. And this is when we're working on disaster sites. I like to reference the Jens Rasmussen, right, with the skills mode, the rules mode, the lack of knowledge mode. And with normal work in a factory, even a construction site, you could get into this stuff here, but you'll never. And on a disaster site, generally, skills mode doesn't exist. So the best you can hope for is you're going to be in the rules mode and for the lack of knowledge mode for that. And so the best you can hope for is rules mode. So that's why PPE is very important. You're not going to be able to necessarily have the hierarchy of controls. You're not going to be able to go out there and say, well, we're going to use the hierarchy of controls on this. That's not going to happen. So right off the bat, you're going down. Elimination usually is impossible. Might be, right, if you plan things out. You're not going to be able to plan out the work. Substitution, engineering controls, maybe, right? But you're going to have a reliance on PPE all the time. And remember, we talked about left of the bang and right of the bang on in previous shows. On the left of the bang is all in the prep. Then you have the bang, the incident, and right of the bang. That's where all your training takes place, and applying that training. And you might have to do on-scene training, but and reacting. You always want to be in the left. And we also have the disaster management cycle, where you have disaster, response, recovery, mitigation, and preparation. And you're always somewhere at mitigation and preparation. Eventually you're going to get there, even if you apply the issue attention cycle to that, where people think that things are resolved and then then something else happens, or they get surprised that things aren't resolved when they thought they were resolved because the news isn't covering it anymore. So, for example, the Hawaii situation with the fires, a lot of people think that that's been resolved, everything's been built up, because they haven't talked about it out here on the East Coast in the last 4 days. And that's what we're trying to do here. So, in the workplace, normal job site, construction, let's say, something like 30% of all injuries are to the hands. All right. And so I would think that gloves are a major part of that whole thing. And I forgot my leather gloves upstairs. Oh no. So this is what we're going to do. So in years gone by here, what did we have? What was the assumption? Right? So someone told you to get, we're going to start with hand protection. Someone told you, go out there and put on a pair of gloves out there. You put on a pair of, and this is all purpose. You had your leather gloves, your cut resistant gloves. I'm guilty of this before I got educated. Jim, why do you cut resistant gloves? Everyone would get these gloves and say, well, those are cut resistant. I'm not poo-pooing the leather gloves, and usually they're good all-around gloves. So when you're dealing with hand protection, what kind of protection are they going to give you for cuts? A little bit, obviously, but they're not rated. So sometime in the mid 2000, at least in my world, everyone started talking about cut resistant gloves. Cut resistant gloves. They have to have a certain rating on them and things of that nature. And glove manufacturers, among other manufacturers, started to develop standards, right? So ANSI started to develop standards for protective gloves. Now you're going to say, well, what's the issue here? What's the issue? What's the big deal? Blah, 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 blah. For this, why do you mention this? There's always a question as far as what cut resistant gloves are, what they are, and everything else. So if I can pull this up, right, that's what we used all the time. And that's not really, no, in a disaster situation, that may be the best that you have. Leather work gloves. So they're good for a lot of different things. But what I do now, I've gotten rid of all of the leather work gloves in my house. I've gotten rid of pretty much all the leather work gloves in the work that I control. And I've used cut level 3 or gloves. What exactly does that mean? We have the ANSI chart here for cut resistant gloves. And essentially, this is what it comes down to. If you look on your screen, and I think this has to be updated. This is as of 2016. But you have the old cut level gloves, and you had 0, and that's the weight in grams needed to cut through the material of the gloves. So with a cut level rating of 0, which has been eliminated since 2016, people, you put 200 grams. We all know what a gram is. A gram is like 2 pistachios with the shells on. And they put the glove in a vise, they go back and forth, and lo and behold, what happens is it takes 200 grams on top of that razor blade that goes back and forth real quick. It essentially takes 200 grams for that. So you have 0, but that is basically what the cut rating was on those old-fashioned leather gloves that we just had up here. Now, under the new ratings, you have A1 through A9. And usually what I recommend in my practice, to recommend an A4 or A5 glove that's right here in the middle here, right, A4 or A5. And that would be for high cut or extreme cut, because things have gotten a lot better manufactured, and we're talking about knit gloves. So if I can't, and then it goes up from there. So for example, A6, A7, A8, or A9, no, start to have other things, the threads made out of different things. So for example, there are like 6 or 7 different types of yarn. If you want to know all of them, give me a call, because what happens is that's all trademarked. And I'm not even sure what the legalities are me of endorsing so many different products out there. But Kevlar was one, for example, but there are like 5 or 6 other different types of yarn. And what we found out was with all this stuff, cut resistance has we're talking knitted gloves, are influenced by 4 different properties. So this here is a knit glove with a cut rating of Two. So if you look here, you have to have, so cut resistance is determined by 4 different things. One of them being, I am getting wicked feedback here. On here, and I don't know where it's coming from necessarily. So hold on. We're going to do that. That should clear it up. All different feedback coming through my headphones. Now, so we have 4 different things. Strength of the yarn, right? So this is the yarn strong. Hardness, right? Is that when a knife, when something else goes over it, right? Does it dull the knife? Then you have elasticity. If you notice on any one of these knit gloves, it's slick. You have a certain lubricant, and you have what is called a rolling action. Meaning if something hits you to cut it, it's going to bunch. So those are the 4 basic things that we're looking for in cut-resistant gloves, the knitted gloves. Now, one of the things that confuses a lot of people here is this. With gloves, right? This is a glove that's from T-Rex, right, by Magid. The gloves here, they think, well, this here, the PVC coming on here, I believe it is PVC, that prevents, that's cut resistance. Well, maybe it adds, but what we're really worried about is wing, right? And with this pair of gloves, you also have impact protection from the back of the hands, protecting the back of the hands. You also have like a wrist thing on here, a wrist guard, hold the glove on, things of that nature. So that is a glove, cut resistant glove. Now, if you go back to your old fashioned leather glove that we had the picture of here, am I saying get rid of that leather glove? You think I'm saying that, get rid of the leather glove? No, we're not saying anything about getting rid of the leather glove, because what happens? You have to assess what your situation are. If you go and try to swing an axe, for example, or a pick, or a shovel, or anything like that, with this kind of glove with a grip on it, guess what? You're going to have yourself a devil of a time trying to go and shovel something. Same thing with an axe. You try swinging an axe or a pick with that kind of glove, you're not going to be very successful. As a matter of fact, you're probably going to get aggravated with that. So again, an assessment done on that. So I recommend always cut level 3 or 4 with those gloves. Going back to I assembled this PPE guide over the course of many, many, many years. So you can also have abrasion resistance with gloves. That's the abrasion thing. Where what kind of abrasiveness does that? How do you have a rating on that? And all of this stuff has to be thought about ahead of time. What are your likely hazards? What are you going to do? Do I want to be prepared for everything? Can I get a good all-around glove? So what I'm looking at, usually since hands, right, and it's a big thing. Yeah, hurt your hands in a disaster, they get dirty. You may not have access to medical care. You may not have access to first aid. You use up your first aid, everything and above. And then we also have our 4 different levels of response, where you have number what I call a type 1, right, which is 0 to 24-hour emergency, then type 2, 24 to 72 or 96 hours, which is what the government tells you should be at a minimum be prepared for, type 3 from 96 hours to 1 month, and then after 1 month you're dealing with number 4, type 4, and you're dealing with primitive living. Hopefully we never get to that situation, because that's a darn near impossible situation for a normal person to prepare for. So we're talking short-term emergencies here. Maybe type 1 or 2 up to 96 hours, or maybe a couple of weeks into this. So the question is, what are your likely hazards? So I'm looking at, you're going to have a surgical glove, for first aid things, maybe. or incidental contact with hazardous materials. This one in particular is a nitrile surgical gloves. Surgical gloves come in nitrile, PVA or PVC or vinyl or something like that, surgical, and the traditional latex. You want to avoid latex, in my experience, because it doesn't hold up well to a lot of things that you may have to deal with in a disaster, like gasoline or oil. All right? First aid, some bloodborne pathogens, situations like that. Then you have so you go in there and you say, well, chemical gloves are kind of hard to determine what you're going to need. Same thing with suits and things of that nature. So you're going to need a couple of different kinds of gloves. You might surgical gloves, leather gloves. I would have cut resistant gloves at a minimum, and also winter gloves. And any one of those could be winter glove type things. Now you're going to say, now, what about chemical resistance? I put together a small chemical resistance thing. This is from one of my some of my training materials, and these are just some of the things. You have butyl gloves, neoprene gloves, nitrile gloves, latex gloves, PVC gloves, right? Neoprene, all of this stuff in here, and they are rated for different things. Now the question is, how do you determine what they're rated for? This is from a very common from a glove that's sold at a very popular home improvement place. And on here, it has all of the chemicals that they're willing to advertise, at least, and what it's good for. So, for example, for a PVC glove, and you have, well, for acetone, uh, for PVC, it's a poor thing, right? Nitrile is also poor. Neoprene is also poor, and latex is fair, right? So P is poor, F is fair, a little bit above. You have to consider how much you're going to be exposed to. So there you have to think about assessment and everything else. However, when you look on here for oil, our PVC glove is great. The nitrile glove is great. The neoprene glove is great. And the latex is poor. So you put oil on latex, you're going to have a problem. And consequently, for birth control, right, latex condoms, they tell you don't put some type of oil-based lubricant on there because it'll destroy the condom. And then, you become a parent. I must put that in there. We got to make this a little bit exciting. As we know, as everybody likes to point out and everybody knows, cells. All right. Now, here comes the other thing with this. Let's say that you're going to have multiple hazards. I have a cut hazard, and I have a chemical hazard. What could you do? Well, it is possible to go out there, and what do? You could have two kinds of gloves on. So here we have a nitrile glove, right? Looks like a dish glove, but it's nitrile. And you can also have a cut-resistant glove. You could double them up. Now, you're also going to say, well, what about on a hazmat site? Don't you normally wear two pairs of gloves? The answer is yes. So the most common, since here in New Jersey, most of the cleanups out here are pretty much oil or some type of oil derivative or oil this or oil that. Usually it's nitrile gloves. So you would have on two pairs of gloves. We're not going to talk about suits today because we have to do that in a much bigger area with the suits. All right. You would have outer glove, and you also have an inner glove. And the outer glove and the inner glove, depending on your situation, is going to be duct tape or chem tape, usually duct tape, but that's seen depending for incidental things. And duct tape, as long as it's compatible, you could use that. But more commonly, chem tape is used for that. And Again, that's advanced preparation for all this stuff. And we cover all this stuff in our disaster response worker class, the outreach class, the 7.5 and the 15-hour class for that. This is another kind of glove, right? Where you have a combination leather glove on the outside, cut resistant glove on the inside, a Kevlar lining on that. And you just go through here. So, for example, if I'm dealing with oils, I'm going to have a nitrile glove. And you have the catch-all glove, and that is Silver Shield. So you look at this, it looks like a plastic bag, and there is an expiration date on these. So these have chemical resistance, usually offers the highest level of overall chemical resistance, but no cut resistance, and it's very not so dexterous. So normally this is worn with as an inner glove, and then you put some type of an appropriate outer glove out there. And by the way, I'm dating myself, right? What does not work is this, and this is not a joke here. Right? You go, Jim, you're always joking. They're inappropriate jokes sometimes. Well, this is not a joke. If you put on a surgical glove, right, let's get the surgical glove on. All right, we have the surgical glove. If you put that surgical glove on, and let's say that you have a pair of leather gloves, and often they'll make you use leather gloves more than one time. You're not really supposed to. And you take that rubber glove, and you put it in the surgical glove, in a regular work glove. Guess what's going to happen, guys? And you could Google this if you're not young enough, if you're very young. The glove doesn't fit. All right? So, and if it's latex inner glove and you try to put it on another glove, it ain't going to fit. So you need to get a bigger glove on that. And if you know what I'm talking about, you're going to get annoyed. Probably. Again, we have here, this is a regular work glove, cotton work glove with a gauntlet on it, right? Gauntlet, and it's dipped in PVC. And usually for years, this is what we use on hazmat sites because we were able to, with incidental exposures, we were able to go out and decontaminate them. Now, and of course, leave them in the work area for work again. And we had inner gloves and everything else. Now, let's talk about head protection. Now, you're going to say, well, Jim, all right, what about head protection? So, there are several different types of hard hats. Right now, we have, right, the traditional hard hat here. Right? So hard hats could either be, and yes, these are Bluetooth earmuffs for the hard hat. Type 1 hard hat, rated for the top flow. Type 2 for the side flow. And again, all of this stuff is rated up to a extent. And we're going to talk about that with foot protection here in a minute. So again, different hard hat. What kind of hard hat should I have out there? And again, remember, you're going to be wearing PPE a little bit more often. You're going to make sure you want to wear PPE, especially in the disaster site situation, limited medical care. Maybe you're preparing your home for disaster preparation, right? You don't want to become part of the problem, wearing a hard hat. So that's basically it. Now, can you wear the hard hat backwards? And the answer is yes, you can wear a hard hat backwards if it's designed to be worn backwards. So, for example, right here, and let's see if we can zoom in a little bit more, we have a circular arrow design. So when it's in a circular arrow, now you can wear it backwards as long as you usually switch the inner suspension. The suspension has got to be inspected and everything else on the inside periodically. Again, this is not a full-blown course, but this is to give you an idea of what you're going to need. Now, the last 4 of the last 6 projects, I know it's dirty here, but hey, I actually work in the field. All right. We've had to go to this type of hard hat Now, it says they've called them multiple things over the years, climbing hard hats or anything else, because there's been some evidence that most of the falls out there, when people fall, which is one of the most common fatality injuries in the industry, in the construction industry, and all across basically general industry, something like 15%, right? Have to do with blows to the head when you fall. And what happens when you have a hard hat without a chin strap? Guess what? It falls off, you hit your head. So a lot of companies are going to this, and this is the requirement where you have a helmet style and you this, and this is a type 1 helmet. And what you are able to is you're able to attach it to your chin, and this way it doesn't fall off. The thing that's good for is if you are, let's say, on a boat. Perfect thing. I got into big trouble one time because my hard hat came off on a boat, right? Or no, it was a dock, but and then while you're walking around without a hard hat, yeah, because it blew off. But that's context. It's kind of hard for some people to understand context. Moving on, we talked about gloves. Now let's talk about boots. So you all heard the commercial. When your feet are okay, you're okay all over. When your feet are warm, you're warm all over, and everything else. Now, in a disaster situation, and I might call them steel toe boots. I know they're safety shoes. All right. So again, diabetes is one of those up and coming. It's been with us forever, but it's one of those things where in the next 30 years, 40 years, something like that. I know you can hear different numbers from different agencies. 20% of the population are going to have diabetes, which means you're going to have some type of neuropathy in your feet, if not at the beginning of the disease, towards the ongoing maintenance of the disease, ongoing on and on and on and on. So what we have, and let me get this side by side, what we have here is safety-toed shoes. Now, they have a rating on them, and it is the ASTM 2413-18 is the rating on these. It used to be called the old Z49, but they've updated it with ASTM, and that's what we use. And the OSHA does not give out standards for boots or for gloves. They refer to an ANSI standard or ASTM standard, NFPA standard for things like that, because those are updated periodically. So we have here this. Now, what are they good for? Generally speaking, 50 pounds, about 3 foot up in the air, roughly, a little bit more, a little bit less. I believe the number is something like 1,500 joules of energy they have to absorb. And that is to the top. Now, I've heard various versions of this story. No, that reading is on the tongue. Jim, I've had my mother's grandfather's uncle was working in a logging camp in the Pacific Northwest in the 1920s during the during the happy 1920s on Skid Row, where my wife is tonight in Portland, right? And there was a tree that fell, and it's usually from 6 to 10 stories, and it fell. And when it fell, it hit his foot. And if it weren't for that steel toe boot, he would still have his toes. Other variations are that they worked in the shipyard, they were moving cargo, they were doing this, doing that. Now, you could go back to Mythbusters and our local guy on there, Adam Savage, there on Mythbusters, and Jamie Bernardin, I think his name was, and they did a whole thing debunking this. What happens is the load, if something like that were to happen, it would be hitting behind the steel toe or the safety toe. Yes, I know they're composite. Well, guess what? In that case, what would you need is a metatarsal guard on that with that. Number one, but no, more importantly, keep your feet out of the line of fire would even be a better solution to that. And PPE being the last solution. So this is what I recommend, is that sort of thing. Glasses. Jim, And, I have a whole guide here. No, steel toe and safety toe shoes are that's a 2 hour long class in itself. But you do have puncture resistant shoes, chemical protective shoes. Again, chemical protective, you can find out. Where else do you find chemical protective information on PPE? You find it out from the manufacturer. It's on their websites. Usually, you can ask for a cut sheet. So for safety glasses, now same deal. We have safety glasses. Should I get them or not? I say yes. And if you can, you get the kind with the gasketed thing, dust goggles with that. I found out in the oil industry that pretty much eye injuries disappear of all types if you require the use of uh, dust with a gasketed eyewear. I have other people saying they absolutely hate it. The other thing, face shields. Do you have to wear goggles under a face shield or safety glasses? The answer is yes. That's the NC standard, and you got to wear it. You got to wear them underneath it because a face shield is not impact resistant. With that, again, this is a general overview with that. And if you look here, right, with the shade colors and uses, so safety glasses have different shades and uses. They're all polycarbonate and they all protect against UV light up to a point. With that, I'm told. This is what I'm told. So if someone goes out there with safety glasses and says, "Oh, well, we're gonna do safety glasses, blah blah blah. We're gonna wear regular sunglasses and they're UV protect." Well, guess they're all polycarbonate. Even the clear ones are you give you UV protection. It's a sales gimmick. And you have different colors that are good for different things. And on shady days, I usually like the amber ones. But what's the most important thing? Safety glasses, Z87 approved. Do they make prescription safety glasses that are Z87 approved? The answer is yes. For that, so get the appropriate pair. Get one with a gasketed around or dust goggles. Those seem to be the most effective. And the other thing is, they're Z87 approved with that. If they're not Z87 approved, they're not safety glasses. There's one manufacturer out there. I'm not going to mention them. That for years everybody said, well, they give more protection than the NCZ87 glasses. Well, guess what? We have a thing called the internet, and there was a alert put out by their people that said, look, safety glasses, ours are better. However, they still have to be Z87 approved. We don't approve ours for use in the workplace. And I used to have to carry that around. Laminated. Noise reduction ratings. Earplugs. Do I need, where do they go? Earplugs. All right. Again, if you can't, not everybody is going to have the equipment or the app on the phone to do that. And you may not be able to do that. If you're dealing with anything, any type of situation where you have to raise your voice, right, for to hear the person next to you, wear ear hearing protection. That's something you want to deal with. All right. We talked about air purifying respirators last time. From time immemorial. Again, this is some of my training materials that I use. And we'll go over suits at another time, but reflective clothing. What do we have? We're going to talk about that next time and protective suits. This was a abbreviated program. We're looking at like 38 minutes on here. We have a whole bunch of stuff going on out here outside of Safety Wars. If I can only come on for 35 minutes, that's all I can come on for is 35 minutes. And I wanted to thank everybody for bearing with us with our everything going on. Next week, I'm planning on being with Todd Conklin, Jay Allen, and all the other people from Safety FM down in Orlando. Check it out on our website. I believe you could make reservations this week. And down in Orlando, go to safetyfm.com. So for Safety Wars, this is Jim Pulsel. We got a big commotion going on in the background here. And Here we go. We'll see you back here tomorrow, God willing.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and its guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the company. Examples of analysis discussed within this podcast are only examples. They should not be utilized in the real world as the only solution available, as they are based only on very limited and dated open source information. Assumptions made within this analysis are not reflective of the position of the company. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, mechanical, electronic, recording, or otherwise, without prior written permission of the creator of the podcast, Jay Allen.